Asterisk disclaimer: the following video contains stories based on historical facts and documented paranormal accounts. Some viewers may find the content disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. This video is intended for educational and entertainment purposes only. Asterisk: have you ever stood in a place so quiet it felt like the silence had weight, like it was pressing in on you from all sides, listening, waiting? There's a place in West Virginia where silence doesn't just linger, it screams. Hidden behind cracked stone walls and rusted iron gates stands the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, a towering Gothic structure that once promised hope to the mentally ill, but became something much darker. Today, its cold halls echo with the footsteps of the forgotten, and its decaying walls whisper secrets only the dead remember. Once, this massive asylum was meant to be a sanctuary. Built in the mid-1800s, it was designed to be a place of healing, a shining example of progressive psychiatric care. But somewhere along the way, that noble mission twisted into something horrific. Overcrowding, neglect, and inhumane treatments turned this once grand facility into a real-life house of horrors. And while the last patients were moved out decades ago, something remains. Visitors report chilling apparitions, shadowy figures darting through empty corridors, and voices calling out from rooms that haven't housed the living in years. Some have even said they'd been touched by invisible hands, or felt sudden, crushing waves of sorrow and rage that seemed to come from nowhere. The air inside the asylum is thick, not just with dust, but with history. The building itself seems to breathe, groan, and shift, as though it's alive. Paint peels like shedding skin from the ceilings. Long, dark corridors seem to stretch forever, and doors creak open slowly on their own, revealing rooms frozen in time. Old beds still sit where patients once lay. Restraints dangle from rusted gurneys. Faded photographs and forgotten belongings rest untouched, as though their owners had only just stepped away. But it's not just the setting that haunts visitors. It's the stories, real, documented events that make even the most skeptical minds question what's possible. One of the most well-known spirits said to roam the halls is that of Lily, a young girl believed to have died within the asylum walls. Some say she was born there, the child of a patient, and died tragically young. Paranormal investigators often leave toys in one particular room where Lily is said to linger. The toys, caught on camera, have moved on their own. A small ball once rolled gently across the floor when no one was near. Other times, faint giggles have been recorded, even when the building was supposedly empty. But Lily is far from alone. The asylum housed thousands over the years, many of whom suffered not just from mental illness, but from the treatments that were forced upon them. Lobotomies were performed in high numbers, often without anesthesia. Electroshock therapy, isolation, and other outdated methods were the norm. Patients were sometimes chained to walls or locked away for years in windowless cells. Some never left. There's a certain room in the asylum known only by its nickname, the suicide ward. Stories say the energy here is darker, heavier. Paranormal teams report equipment malfunctions, sudden temperature drops, and unexplained physical sensations, scratches, pressure, dizziness. People who've walked through its halls have burst into tears without knowing why, overcome by emotions that don't belong to them. Many believe it's not just haunted by those who died there, but also by the pain, trauma, and hopelessness that consumed them. And then there's the basement. Cold, damp, and nearly pitch black, it's said to be the most active area of the asylum. Shadow figures are seen moving between the old laundry rooms and storage areas. Disembodied voices, some pleading, others screaming, have been captured on EVP recordings. Several visitors have run from the basement, shaken and pale, convinced they weren't alone. It's not only ghost hunters who've experienced the asylum's dark pull. Tour guides, maintenance workers, even skeptics have found themselves questioning what they've seen and heard. One former caretaker reportedly refused to re-enter the building after hearing a voice call his name from an empty hallway, followed by a sudden, ice-cold gust of wind that blew all the doors shut at once. Still, every year, people return. Some are drawn by curiosity. Others by a fascination with the paranormal. And some say they feel called, like something inside the asylum wants them there. But what is it that truly haunts Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum? Is it the spirits of the dead, forever trapped in the place where they suffered? Or is it something darker, something that feeds on fear, pain, and isolation? And what really happened in the eastern wing, where several doors remain permanently locked? There's a part of the building where staff refuse to go alone. The energy there, they say, is different, more intelligent, more aware. Some believe it's the spirit of a violent former patient. Others whisper about secret experiments, hidden rooms, and things that never made it into the official records. One investigator claimed he found a small, padlocked box deep in that wing, old, rusted, and humming with a strange warmth. He never opened it. He never went back. And shortly after, he vanished from the paranormal scene altogether, deleting his videos and going completely silent online. To this day, no one knows what he found. But the box remains. Hidden. Waiting. Tonight, we're going to take you inside Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, not just through its haunted halls, but through its history, its mysteries, and its most chilling encounters. We'll explore stories from those who lived and died there, and from those who faced the darkness it still holds. Some may call them legends, but others know, they're far too real. And as the sun sets and shadows crawl across those time-worn walls, remember, not all who enter leave unchanged. Because something watches from the dark. And it's waiting for you. Are you ready to walk the halls of America's most haunted asylum? The heavy iron doors groaned as they swung open, their rusted hinges protesting after decades of wear. The hallway beyond was cloaked in a darkness that felt thicker than night. Dust floated lazily through the air, illuminated by the weak beam of a flashlight, and every step echoed with a hollow finality, like a whisper from the building itself. The air was stale, suffocating, filled with the smell of mold, old wood, and something faintly metallic. As the flashlight passed over peeling wallpaper and rusted door handles, it became clear, this place had been left untouched for years, yet it felt anything but empty. The group of investigators moved quietly, their voices barely above a whisper. No one wanted to speak too loudly here. It wasn't just respect for the dead, it was instinct. Something about the asylum demanded silence, as though sound itself could wake something best left sleeping. Emma, one of the lead investigators, had been inside dozens of haunted locations across the country. But she admitted, even before stepping foot inside, this one felt different. She couldn't explain why. It wasn't fear, exactly, it was something deeper. A pull. Like the building itself wanted her there, like it had something to show her. Something it had been waiting to reveal. They started in the old common area. Faint outlines of furniture remained, broken chairs, overturned tables, a cracked piano in the corner that hadn't played a tune in years. Emma swept her flashlight across the room, and for a split second, she thought she saw a figure seated at the piano bench. But when she looked again, it was empty. Her breath caught in her throat. She didn't mention it. Not yet. In another hallway, they passed faded murals, once bright images of flowers, children, and open fields, now distorted and warped by water damage. The paint had run in long, dark streaks that made the cheerful scenes look like they were weeping. One wall bore a name carved into it over and over again, in frantic, jagged letters. No one in the group recognized it. But when Emma touched the wall, she pulled her hand back quickly, she could have sworn it was warm. Later, they entered what used to be the hydrotherapy wing. Rows of deep, claw-footed tubs sat like forgotten tombs. The air was colder here. Their breath turned to mist. One of the crew members, Ben, started recording audio and asked the usual questions. Is anyone here with us? Do you want to communicate? For a while, nothing happened. Then the faucet on the nearest tub turned itself on. The water splashed into the basin, loud and sudden. Everyone froze. Ben reached out, hand shaking, and turned the faucet off. They waited. Nothing. But when they checked the video footage later, the sound of the faucet turning on was missing. Instead, there was a low, steady hum. Almost like a voice, stretched and slowed until it was unrecognizable. Emma replayed it again and again, each time feeling a deeper unease. It didn't sound angry. It sounded hungry. In another part of the building, the children's ward, they found old toys scattered across the floor. A tiny tea set, a cracked doll with one missing eye, and a music box that no longer worked. Or so they thought. As the group stepped into the room, the music box sprang to life with a tinny, slow lullaby that echoed through the empty wing. It played for exactly 23 seconds, then stopped on its own. When they opened it, the winding mechanism was completely broken. That night, Emma decided to sleep in the asylum. Alone. It wasn't a stunt. She needed answers. And more than that, she needed to know why she felt drawn to this place in the first place. She set up a camera in the hallway outside the old nurse's station and positioned another in the room where she would stay, a former therapy room with cracked mirrors lining one wall. As she lay down on her sleeping bag, her flashlight beside her, she stared at the mirrored wall for a long time. Her reflection seemed off. Not different exactly, but delayed. She'd tilt her head slightly, and for a fraction of a second, the woman in the mirror wouldn't move. Sleep didn't come easily. The building creaked and groaned as if it remembered her presence. At one point during the night, a soft knock came at the door. 3 slow taps. Emma sat up, heart pounding. She called out, "Who's there?" No answer. She opened the door and looked into the hallway. No one. But when she played back the hallway camera footage the next morning, something chilled her to her core. At the exact time she heard the knock, the hallway camera showed a tall, thin shadow pass just outside the room. Not walking, gliding. Its arms were long and seemed to stretch farther than they should. No visible face. And as it passed the camera, all the lights in that section of the asylum blinked out, just for a second. Long enough for the figure to vanish. Emma didn't sleep again after that. Over the following days, the team uncovered more than they bargained for. Old records, locked away in a forgotten file room behind a crumbling wall, told stories the public had never heard. Patients who had vanished with no explanation. A doctor dismissed quietly after a string of incidents that were never investigated. A string of suicides that occurred exactly 13 days apart, each in the same room. The reports were vague, written in official language that avoided blame but hinted at something deeply wrong. Something that had been covered up. They found a letter, yellowed with age and tucked behind a broken drawer, written by a former nurse. She spoke of hearing voices calling her name from vents, of seeing shadows that didn't match any person in the room. She begged whoever found the letter to leave. "This place feeds on you," she wrote, "and the more you give it, the more it takes. If you stay too long, you forget who you are. You become part of it." Emma didn't want to believe that. But already, she'd begun dreaming in the asylum's voice. Strange, fragmented images. A child crying behind a locked door. A man in a white coat holding a needle with no expression. A face staring back at her from the mirror, but it wasn't her own. Something was building. Each day in the asylum made the air feel heavier, as though they were descending, not just through the floors of the building, but into something deeper. The kind of darkness that doesn't just hide things, it changes them. They hadn't even reached the eastern wing yet. And already, things were slipping out of their control. What they didn't know was that the asylum had been waiting for them long before they arrived. And now that they were inside, it wasn't letting go. By the third night, Emma had stopped trying to rationalize what was happening. Sleep came in fits, and when it did, it was filled with broken, feverish dreams, visions of long corridors that stretched into blackness, filled with faceless patients whispering in a language she didn't understand. Every time she woke, there was a moment, just a flicker, when she didn't recognize the room or remember who she was. It passed quickly, but the feeling lingered like a splinter in her mind. The rest of the team was starting to crack too. Ben, the audio tech, who had once confidently laughed off ghosts and claimed he was immune to the creepy stuff, now refused to go anywhere in the building alone. He kept fiddling with his recorder, insisting that he was picking up voices whispering directly into the mic, always his name, repeated softly, again and again. Ben. Ben, come here. But when he played it back for the others, the recording was clean. Nothing. Even worse, someone, or something, was moving their equipment. Cameras they'd mounted the night before would be discovered turned off or facing the wrong direction by morning, sometimes hidden entirely. Cables were yanked from the walls. Batteries drained within minutes. They had started keeping backups, but even those weren't safe. One night, they found every single camera lens smeared with something sticky, like old blood or grease. It wasn't there before they'd gone to sleep. Emma tried to keep control, tried to keep everyone focused, but she couldn't ignore the growing dread that curled deeper each time she walked the halls. The asylum was changing. Or maybe it was them who were changing. The building seemed to know their fears, their weaknesses. It showed them things they didn't speak about afterward. During one solo sweep of the West Wing, Emma heard someone sobbing inside one of the old isolation rooms. When she got closer, she realized it wasn't just crying, it was her own voice. A perfect imitation. And it was saying things she'd never said aloud. In the dim light of the corridor, she pressed her back to the wall, hand over her mouth, frozen. The crying stopped. Silence followed. Then, a long, drawn-out scrape from the other side of the door, as if someone was dragging their nails across the wall, slowly, methodically. She never opened that door. The teen began arguing more often. Paranoia crept in. Sarah, their researcher, accused Ben of playing tricks to scare them. Ben accused Emma of manipulating them for footage. Tension flared over the smallest things, misplaced gear, forgotten tasks, strange sounds that no one wanted to admit they'd heard. But underneath it all, they were afraid. Not just of the building, but of each other. It was as if something inside the asylum was pressing against their minds, warping their trust. Then, they found the staircase. It was hidden behind a boarded-up wall in the eastern wing, one they hadn't been able to access until now. The boards had fallen overnight, literally. The crew arrived that morning to find them scattered across the floor, as if torn from the wall by something on the other side. Behind them, a narrow spiral staircase led down into the dark, damp foundation of the building. No one had any record of this part of the asylum. Not in the blueprints. Not in the reports. It wasn't supposed to exist. Emma insisted they wait, regroup, plan. But Ben was already halfway down the stairs before she could stop him. They followed, flashlights flickering as they descended into a space colder than any other in the building. The basement they thought they knew, the laundry room, storage, was 2 floors above this level. Down here, the air felt ancient. Wet stone walls lined a long tunnel, and faint red markings, symbols, were scratched into them, their meaning impossible to understand. The smell of rot was stronger here, but it wasn't the smell of death, it was older. Like the earth itself had soured. At the end of the tunnel was a room. Inside, the walls were lined with metal cages, small, barely big enough for a person to crouch. Each one was rusted shut. Some had dark stains on the floor. In one corner sat a wooden chair bolted to the ground, heavy leather straps still hanging from its arms. This wasn't part of any documented treatment. This wasn't psychiatry. This was something else. Sarah was the first to say it, this feels like a ritual space. They laughed nervously, but no one disagreed. On the floor in the center of the room was a large, perfectly carved circle. More symbols surrounded it, etched deep into the concrete. Someone had gone to great effort to make this, and to keep it hidden. Emma didn't want to be in that room. Everything in her screamed to leave. But her legs felt heavy, like the floor was pulling her down. She tried to speak, but her throat was tight. And then they heard it, behind them. Footsteps. Not the scuff of shoes or the shuffle of something human. These steps were slow, wet, dragging. No one moved. The sound grew louder until it stopped just outside the tunnel entrance. Ben turned with the camera, but the light on it cut out. Total darkness. A whisper followed. Not in English. Low, guttural, almost like chanting, but garbled. Distorted. When the flashlight flickered back on, the tunnel was empty again. But the symbols on the floor, they were glowing. Faintly. Pulsing like a heartbeat. They ran. Back upstairs, everything felt different. The building was colder, angrier. Doors slammed behind them with unnatural force. The hallways seemed unfamiliar, like they were being rearranged. Sarah said she saw her own reflection in a window smile back at her, but she hadn't been smiling. Ben started mumbling to himself in his sleep, saying the same thing over and over, "It's not a building. It's a mouth." Emma began to question whether the asylum had ever been abandoned. The sounds in the night, the crying, the footsteps, the whispering, felt too regular, too intentional. Not random hauntings. Not echoes of the past. But a presence. A consciousness. Something that had been watching. And now that they'd found the room beneath, whatever it was seemed to be watching even closer. They hadn't seen Lily since that first night. The toys she'd once moved now sat still, cold, untouched. And the room where she was said to linger felt empty. Not peacefully empty. Abandoned. Like even the child spirit was gone. Or had been taken. That night, a new voice came through on Ben's recorder. Female. Calm. But distorted. It said only one thing: "You opened the door. Now close your eyes." And in the background, barely audible, was the sound of something breathing. Heavy. Wet. And very, very close. Emma couldn't remember the last time she'd seen daylight. The asylum swallowed time. Days blurred together in the same gray corridors and shadowed stairwells, where the air seemed to grow thicker, heavier, almost alive. The windows, what few remained, offered nothing but a flat, leaden sky, always cloudy, never quite day or night. Her phone had stopped syncing days ago. It said 3:33 a.m. no matter when she looked. Something had changed in all of them. They were paler, quieter. They moved like ghosts through the halls, barely speaking, eyes flickering to corners they couldn't explain. Emma had caught her own reflection in a broken mirror and recoiled, not because of anything visibly wrong, but because it didn't blink when she did. It watched her like a stranger might. Ben no longer slept. He sat in the hallway at night, back pressed to the cold stone, whispering into his audio recorder even when it wasn't on. Sarah had grown erratic, pacing in circles around the perimeter of their sleeping quarters, muttering to herself, drawing symbols on scraps of paper she refused to let anyone touch. She said they kept her safe, but the more she drew them, the more she trembled. Her hands were always cold, no matter how many layers she wore. The building responded to them now. Lights flickered when they argued. Doors locked behind them without a sound. Once, during a power test, every battery-powered device in the building died at the same time: cameras, lights, recorders, even flashlights. The backup generator failed to kick in. They were plunged into a silence so complete it felt like pressure on the chest. That night, none of them spoke. They all heard it: the dragging footsteps, the low humming from the basement, the sound of something moving just behind the walls. The asylum was alive, and it was listening. Emma became obsessed with the underground room. No one wanted to return, but she did, alone, if necessary. Something about it felt connected to everything else. The shadows, the voices, the way time twisted around them. Whatever was wrong with the asylum, whatever had always been wrong, it started there. She needed answers. She made her way down after midnight. Her flashlight dimmed with every step. She could feel the cold rising to meet her, coiling around her legs like smoke. The moment she stepped into the chamber, her breath left her chest. The circle on the floor was still there, but now it pulsed softly, faintly glowing a dull red. Emma approached slowly, heart pounding. As she stepped into the ring, the air dropped 10 degrees in an instant. Her fingers went numb. The flashlight flickered once, then died. She stood there, blind in the dark, surrounded by ancient symbols and silence. And then, something touched her. It was just a brush against her arm, gentle, almost tentative. But it was enough. She staggered back, stumbling out of the circle, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. The flashlight sputtered back to life just long enough for her to see her arm, 5 long, black smudges across her skin, like fingerprints dipped in ash. She didn't tell the others right away. She couldn't. Every instinct told her to lie, to say nothing. That touch, it hadn't just been physical. It had reached inside her, curled around something in her chest. And she knew, with a certainty she couldn't explain, that whatever it was, it hadn't let go. That night, the screams started. They came from deep within the asylum, echoing through every hallway, distant at first, then closer, too close. Male and female, young and old, overlapping cries of panic and pain. The team huddled together, back to back, gripping useless equipment and whispering over each other. But the screams didn't stop. They grew louder. More frantic. One long, unbroken wall of terror that didn't belong to the past, it was now. Ben broke first. He grabbed his recorder and ran toward the sound. Emma screamed after him, but he didn't stop. His footsteps vanished into the darkness, swallowed instantly. Seconds passed. Then minutes. Then, silence. They found him the next morning curled in the corner of the old therapy room, eyes wide open, unmoving. His lips moved silently, mouthing the same phrase over and over, "The door is open. The door is open. The door is open." Sarah refused to go near him. She stood at the edge of the room, shaking, her hands clutched around the pages she'd filled with those strange, looping symbols. She said they were changing, that they shifted when she wasn't looking. One page now bore something else, a crude drawing of the asylum's front entrance, split open like a gaping mouth. Figures, tiny, stick-like, featureless, were shown being swallowed by it. The same night, Emma woke up with blood on her fingertips. She hadn't been hurt. But when she turned on the camera next to her sleeping bag and rewound the footage, she saw herself rise in the middle of the night, eyes closed, face blank. She walked out into the hallway and disappeared from view. 17 minutes later, she returned and laid back down. The only thing out of place? Her hands, both stained dark up to the wrist. She never remembered any of it. There were no more safe rooms. No corner that didn't groan with whispers or creak with movement. The building breathed. And it had learned their names. The whispers now came directly to them, just inches from their ears. Emma would turn sharply, sure someone was behind her. There never was. But the voice would repeat her name, soft and slow like a lullaby. The floorboards shifted differently now. Like they were flexing. Walls pulsed with moisture. Black mold crept rapidly across ceilings and doorframes, blooming overnight into patterns that resembled faces, screaming, gasping, pleading. Sometimes the faces moved. They tried to leave. They packed what they could, carried Ben between them, and rushed toward the main entrance. But the door, once rusted and unyielding, was gone. In its place was a blank wall. No hinges, no handle, no sign it had ever existed. Panic tore through them. Sarah screamed, pounding the wall with both fists until her hands bled. Emma backed away slowly, staring at the wall, then at the hallway behind them. It looked different now, longer. Narrower. Doors where there hadn't been any before. The asylum wasn't just haunted. It was shifting. Rewriting itself around them. They were no longer visitors. They were pieces, parts, furniture in its grand, decaying body. And it had plans for them. That night, Emma dreamed of the underground chamber again. But this time, she wasn't alone. She stood at the center of the glowing circle, surrounded by patients, dozens of them, each one faceless, dressed in tattered gowns. Their heads tilted in sync. And from the shadows, a figure stepped forward. A man in a doctor's coat, mouth sewn shut, eyes burning like hot coal. He pointed directly at her. And whispered. She opened the door. Emma woke with her lips stitched shut, threaded not with string, but with her own hair. She screamed as she tore them free, blood pouring down her chin. The others stared in horror. No one said a word. There was no escape. And now, the asylum wasn't just watching them. It was hungry. It had been 6 days since they'd lost track of time entirely. The clocks had all stopped. Phones were dead, batteries drained. Emma couldn't even tell if it was day or night anymore. The sky outside the barred windows had turned an unnatural shade, neither black nor gray, more like the color of deep water, thick and endless. The air smelled metallic, like rust and soil, and every breath felt like inhaling dust from something ancient. Sarah was gone now. They'd woken up that morning to find her sleeping bag empty. The papers she'd guarded so obsessively had been shredded into hundreds of tiny pieces, scattered across the hallway like confetti. Blood, too much of it, marked the floor in a messy trail that led toward the east wing. Emma followed it, against every instinct, calling out into the silence. But the trail ended abruptly in front of a wall. Not a door. Not a passage. Just brick. Except, it hadn't been a wall yesterday. Emma pressed her hands against it, the surface strangely warm, pulsing faintly under her touch. She whispered Sarah's name. The wall whispered it back. She stumbled away, breath shaking. The building was eating them, one by one. Not killing them. Consuming them. Ben was little more than a shell. He didn't speak anymore. He sat near the nurse's station with his recorder clutched to his chest, rocking slowly, eyes vacant. But every now and then, his mouth would twitch, and he'd mutter phrases Emma didn't understand, phrases in a language that felt older than the walls around them. She stopped trying to make sense of it. It wasn't meant to be understood. It was meant to be heard. She wanted to scream. To cry. To break something just to prove she still had control. But even her emotions felt like they didn't belong to her anymore. She barely remembered why she had come in the first place. The documentary, the investigation, it all felt like a dream from another life. Now, she was just trying to survive. But survival didn't seem to be an option. That night, everything changed. Emma heard the music box again. It was faint, drifting through the vents, a warped lullaby echoing off the walls. She hadn't heard it since that first night, back when Lily, whatever Lily was, had made her presence known. The others had dismissed it, but Emma knew what it meant. She followed it. Down the west corridor. Past the broken operating room. Past the collapsed stairwell. She moved like someone in a trance, feet light on the cracked tiles. The music led her to a door she'd never seen before. It was old, really old, and carved with strange, looping symbols that hurt her eyes if she looked too long. The knob was cold, wet with condensation. She hesitated, then turned it. Inside was a room that shouldn't have existed. It was pristine. Spotless white walls. A single bed with iron rails. A chair in the corner. An old phonograph playing the music box tune, turning slowly though it had no visible power source. In the bed was a figure, small, frail, under thin white sheets. A girl. She couldn't have been more than 10. Her eyes were closed. Her hair was long, tangled, and dark. Emma stepped closer, heart pounding in her throat. The girl's face looked familiar. Too familiar. She reached out, the girl's eyes snapped open. And Emma saw herself. Not just a resemblance. It was her. Younger. Pale. Hollow-eyed. The girl stared up at her with a kind of sadness Emma couldn't describe, and whispered, "You're not supposed to be here. You're not supposed to remember." The room vanished. She was suddenly standing alone in the hallway, gasping for breath, the door gone. The music box silenced. Her hands were shaking violently. What had she seen? A hallucination? A warning? Or a memory? And then the truth hit her like ice water. She had been here before. Not for the documentary. Not recently. A long, long time ago. Bits and pieces came back, fragments she'd buried so deep, her mind had locked them away for protection. The heavy iron gates. Her mother's voice telling her to be brave. The smell of antiseptic and fear. A woman in white leading her down a long hallway by the hand. Emma hadn't come to investigate the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. She had returned to it. As a child, she had been admitted here. But no records existed, no files, no photos, no proof. She had always assumed her memories were from nightmares or old horror movies, not real. Her parents had never spoken of it. But the asylum remembered her. It had been waiting. And now, it wanted her back. The ground beneath her feet trembled. The walls began to shift, slowly, like they were inhaling. The lights overhead burst one by one in rapid succession, plunging her into blackness. The whispers rose again, hundreds of them, layered and desperate. But they weren't speaking to her. They were speaking through her. A voice erupted in her mind, ancient and furious. You opened the door. And now, you stay. Emma ran, blindly, through corridors that no longer obeyed geometry. Hallways twisted on themselves. Rooms folded inward. Doorways led to stairwells that disappeared mid-step. Time fractured. She passed Ben, who was now crawling on all fours, speaking in tongues, his eyes milk-white. He didn't even see her. She screamed his name, but it was like her voice no longer carried weight. The asylum was collapsing inward, but not physically. Reality itself was being rewritten. And at the center of it all, the chamber. The ritual room in the depths of the asylum. Emma found herself there again without knowing how. The circle on the floor was no longer dormant, it was alive, glowing violently, symbols dancing like flames. Shadows ringed the room, watching her, growing taller, darker. At the center stood the doctor, the same stitched-mouth figure from her dreams. Only now, his mouth was open. Rows of jagged teeth. No tongue. No jawbone. Just a void. He stepped toward her, lifting one skeletal hand, and pointed directly at her heart. You were the key, the void whispered. You brought us back. Emma fell to her knees. She couldn't breathe. The air turned solid around her, heavy as stone. Her vision narrowed. The chamber shook. In her final moment of clarity, she realized the worst part. This wasn't about documenting the past. This was about waking it up. And now it was awake. What would you do in this situation? Do you think Emma will survive? Let us know in the comments, and remember, some doors should never be opened. Emma wasn't sure if she was still breathing. The chamber pulsed around her like the inside of a living creature, the red glow from the symbols on the floor bathing everything in a sick, flickering light. The stitched-mouthed doctor stood tall at the center, his hollow, gaping mouth now wider than any human jaw should stretch. It emitted no sound, only pressure. Like the moment before a thunderclap. The silence before devastation. She had no weapons. No plan. Just a shredded mind and a body running on the last fumes of fear. But something in her screamed move, so she did. Emma hurled herself out of the circle, rolling across the cold stone as a force behind her cracked the air like a whip. The circle responded, lighting up brighter. The shadows in the walls, those tall, rippling figures, began to peel themselves free and move toward her, slow and elegant, like they had all the time in the world. She scrambled to her feet and ran. The asylum did not make it easy. The hallways twisted and reshaped under her, leading her deeper instead of out. Every door slammed shut behind her. Every corner she turned only led to older, more decayed parts of the building. At one point, she found herself in the old hydrotherapy room, the smell of mildew and stagnant water nearly choking her. The tubs were filled with something thick and dark. Something that moved. She turned and slammed into Ben. His eyes had returned to their sockets, but they looked through her, not at her. His lips moved, and this time she heard the words clearly, she came back. She broke the seal. They all remember now. Ben, she whispered, shaking him, you have to help me. We have to stop this, whatever this is. He blinked slowly. Then, to her surprise, he nodded. The girl, he said hoarsely. She's the beginning. Emma's breath caught. Lily? No. You. His eyes locked on hers. The little version of you. Emma froze. That room. The bed. The music box. The version of herself she had seen lying there, eyes hollow, staring up with a broken kind of sorrow. It wasn't a dream. It wasn't a trick. She had been split. The ritual, all those years ago, had fractured her, locked part of her away. And now that she was whole again, they had power. They were using her memories like keys, unlocking sealed doors not just in the asylum, but in whatever thin veil separated this world from the next. If she wanted to stop it, she would have to find that piece of herself again. The child. The moment she thought it, the asylum responded. A door appeared in the wall to her left, an old wooden door, almost beautiful in its design. Carved with ivy and delicate curves, unlike anything else in the asylum. It looked inviting. Emma and Ben exchanged one last look. He placed his hand on her shoulder. End it. She stepped through the door. She was no longer in the asylum. She stood in a field of gray grass under a sky that never changed. Silent. Still. Ahead of her was a single swing set, rusted and half sunken into the earth. On the swing sat the child version of herself, gently rocking, humming the lullaby Emma had heard since her first night inside the asylum. The girl looked up. Are you here to take me back? She asked quietly. Emma hesitated. I think I am you. The girl nodded. They locked me here when I was small. Because I saw them. Because I let them in. Emma felt her stomach twist. It wasn't your fault. They told me it was. The girl slowed the swing. But you forgot. You forgot all of it. And now they're angry. The wind changed. The sky darkened. They want to cross, the girl whispered. They're so close. Emma stepped forward. Can you stop them? I can't, the girl said. But we can. And just like that, the world fell away. Emma jolted back into her body in the chamber. The girl, her younger self, stood beside her now, made of light and shadow, hands glowing with white fire. The stitched-mouthed doctor howled, the first sound he had ever made, a sound so loud the walls cracked. The shadows lunged. Emma grabbed her younger self's hand. Together, they stepped into the circle. The moment they did, the floor erupted with light. The symbols bled gold. The shadows screamed as the brightness touched them. The doctor tried to push forward, but something unseen repelled him, flinging him against the far wall. Emma saw it all then, every lost soul that had been devoured by the asylum. The screams in the night. The twisted faces in the mold. The whispers in the walls. All of them had been fragments, echoes of the hundreds who had suffered and been erased. The asylum was a prison. Not just for the living, but for the dead. And Emma, she had been the gatekeeper. Now she had a choice, to escape, or to seal it forever. She looked at the girl, who nodded, eyes brimming with quiet understanding. I'm tired, the girl whispered. Let's finish it. Emma pressed both hands to the floor, the heat of the ritual burning through her palms. She felt the circle lock. The door close. The light surge outward, through every hallway, every room, every cursed inch of the building. Ben's scream echoed in the distance, one final plea, or maybe a warning. And then, silence. When Emma opened her eyes, she was standing outside the front gates. Alone. The asylum loomed behind her, still and gray, its windows dark. No glow. No voices. No movement. The grass was overgrown. The gates rusted shut. It was like it had always been abandoned. Except. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out with shaking hands. The date read April 23, 1996. That wasn't right. She flipped to the camera app. Her reflection stared back. But it wasn't her. It was the girl. The same hollow eyes. The same pale skin. Emma dropped the phone. She stepped away from the gates, but the asylum wasn't done with her. The wind carried the faint sound of the music box again. And as she turned, just for a second, she saw herself standing in the upper window. Smiling. Inside. Still trapped. Still watching. The asylum had let something out, but had taken something back in its place. What would you do if you were Emma? Do you think she ever truly escaped, or did she trade one prison for another? Let us know in the comments, if you're still listening. Because some stories don't end. They just wait to be remembered. Days passed, or maybe it was weeks, Emma couldn't tell anymore. Time had never truly returned to normal after she left the asylum. The world outside looked the same on the surface, cars passed, lights blinked green to red, people walked their dogs and checked their phones, but Emma moved through it like a ghost. Detached. Faded. As if part of her had never left that place. She checked herself in every mirror she passed. Not out of vanity, but necessity. Some part of her still didn't trust what she saw looking back. The face was hers, mostly. But her eyes lingered too long in the reflection, as if they belonged to someone else. Sometimes, just as she turned away, she could swear her reflection didn't follow. The asylum was officially condemned, again. News outlets covered the incident briefly, a building collapse, an investigation into illegal trespassing. Ben's body was never found. Neither was Sarah's. Emma didn't give any statements. She couldn't explain any of it without sounding insane, and the truth wasn't something people wanted to hear. They wanted haunted house stories with jump scares and ghost hunting gadgets. Not this. Not what really lived in those walls. The footage they captured was gone. Cameras fried. Tapes blank. But Emma remembered everything. Every whisper. Every shadow. Every scream. And the girl. The girl was still with her. Not visibly. Not audibly. But she was there. Sometimes Emma would hear humming in the quietest moments, when brushing her teeth, or walking through an empty parking lot. The same lullaby. Faint. Almost loving. Other times she'd wake up with dirt under her fingernails, or scratches she couldn't explain. Once, she found an old iron key on her nightstand. She didn't touch it. She just stared at it until the sun came up, and when she looked again, it was gone. She'd tried to move on. She really had. New job. New apartment. New city. But it followed her. She started seeing stories online. Rumors on niche forums. People talking about the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum being more active than ever. Security guards quitting after strange encounters. A group of thrill-seekers disappearing during a livestream. A janitor found mumbling in Latin, eyes rolled back. Most dismissed it as hoaxes, but Emma knew better. The asylum had been sealed, but not silenced. And then, one night, a letter arrived at her door. No postage. No name. Just her own handwriting on the front, a perfect match. Inside was a single photograph. A grainy image of a long hallway. Peeling paint. Empty beds. A cracked window at the end. She recognized it instantly, it was the same hallway she'd seen in her visions, over and over. But there was something new in the picture this time. A figure. Standing far in the background, just barely visible in the blur. A girl in a white gown. Head tilted. Watching. Emma dropped the photo and backed away. The lullaby started again. Only this time, it wasn't in her head. It was coming from the hallway. Her hallway. She stepped to the door, slowly, hand trembling as she reached for the knob. She opened it, and found nothing but the dim hallway of her apartment complex. Quiet. Still. Except at the far end, something was wrong. The paint on the wall, just beside the exit sign, had started to peel in long vertical strips, exposing old brick. Too old. Not part of this building. Not part of this world. Emma slammed the door shut and pressed her back to it, panting. The asylum was spreading. Or maybe it never stopped. She now understood what the girl had meant. By stepping back inside, Emma hadn't just closed the loop. She'd become part of it. A living extension of the place. A vessel. And through her, the asylum could grow. It didn't need bricks or mortar anymore. It only needed memory. And she remembered everything. Some nights, Emma would wake up to the sound of her front door opening. Always just a creak. Always just once. She kept a chair under the knob now. It never made a difference. Other nights, she would find things rearranged. Chairs facing different directions. Drawers left open. Her old camcorder left running, red light blinking, though she hadn't touched it in months. The last time she watched the playback, she saw something she couldn't explain. It was her, sleeping. Unmoving. Peaceful. And then, from the edge of the frame, a small figure crawled slowly into view. Pale. Delicate. Humming softly. The girl placed something beside Emma's head and whispered something into her ear. The clip ended there. The audio corrupted. Emma never watched it again. And yet, she can't bring herself to destroy the camera. She knows the asylum is still with her. Still watching. Still waiting. Sometimes, she wonders if the final ritual really sealed the door, or simply opened it wider. She's not sure how much time she has left before the walls of her world crack again. But she does know this: whatever is inside Trans-Allegheny, whatever woke up that night, it hasn't finished what it started. And maybe, just maybe, Emma isn't Emma anymore. She's what came back. She's what walked out. And somewhere behind her eyes, the asylum still watches through her. Still remembering. Still waiting. Still hungry. What do you think really happened to Emma? Did she ever leave the asylum, or did it simply follow her home? Let us know in the comments below. And if you want a sequel, if you dare, tell us what you'd do if your past suddenly came knocking. Because the scariest part of a true story is when it's not over. If you're still watching, then maybe, just maybe, you made it out. For now. But remember, some stories don't end when the video does. Some stay with you. What happened at the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum wasn't just a tale of shadows and screams. It was real. And what Emma went through could happen to anyone. Even you. Have you ever felt like someone was watching you when you were alone? Heard a voice whisper your name in an empty room? Or seen something in the corner of your eye, only for it to vanish when you looked directly? Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's just your mind. Or maybe, it's already begun. Tell us in the comments, what would you do if you were in Emma's place? Would you go inside? Would you fight? Would you run? Or, would you surrender? We want to hear your theories. Was she really free? Or did something follow her back? And if you have your own paranormal experience, share it below. You never know, your story could be featured in one of our next episodes. If you found this terrifying journey gripping, give this video a like, it helps more than you know. Subscribe to Horror True Stories so you never miss a new nightmare, because we're just getting started. And don't forget to hit the bell icon, or you might not hear the warning before it's too late. We dive deep into real haunted places, documented encounters, and chilling mysteries that go beyond simple ghost stories. These tales are based on truth. On lived experiences. On the moments that stay with people for life. So if you love horror that feels too real. If you love stories that stay with you even after the screen fades to black. You're in the right place. Every week, we'll bring you more bone-chilling narratives. More whispers from the dark. More true horror. And just before we go, ask yourself this: When the video ends, when the lights go out, when everything's quiet, what if you're not alone? Thanks for watching. This was Horror True Stories. We'll see you in the dark.